Hi, I'm Jo Clark, and thanks so much for joining me on the Redefining Midlife podcast. Before today's special interview, I want to invite you to my free online workshop, From Surviving to Thriving, on Wednesday, the 18th of January. If you've lived through 2022 feeling constantly exhausted, stressed, overwhelmed, and was always the last on your to-do list, then this is a workshop for you. You can find a morning and an evening time that you can choose from, and in each session, I'm going to be sharing plenty of tips and information on how you can successfully reach your health and wellness goals. You're going to be able to leave the workshop ready to thrive in 2023. You'll be leaving with a clear plan that suits your needs and your lifestyle. Head to the show notes for the link or go straight to www.joclarkcoaching.com/thrive to register for one of the free workshops. I'd really love to see you there. Now for today's special guest. Annette Densham is one of the most interesting and resilient women I've ever had the pleasure of meeting. Her life reads like an epic mini-series that's been written by an over-imaginative author. But it's not fiction. Annette has packed so much into her first 5 decades of life, although, as you'll hear, much of it wasn't by her choice. Her book, How to Eat a Shit Sandwich and Keep Smiling, which is a cracker title, chronicles the first half of her life, and it includes her stories of abandonment, bullying, sexual abuse, and domestic violence. Having a mother who lived a gypsy lifestyle meant that Annette had lived in 96 houses by the time that she was 17. And to escape the reality of her world, Annette sought refuge in stories, and the books in the library became her best friends. It was absolutely no surprise to anyone when Annette chose to go into journalism. And after decades of writing from major print publications and online magazines on topics from business and computers to senior issues and forklifts, she moved into corporate communications. Now, as another reinvention, she's working as an entrepreneur. And Annette and her business partner help equip, educate, and encourage businesses to use their stories to promote what they do across multiple channels. And she's won a few awards along the way for the impact that she's had. That's her being very modest. Annette's attitude and philosophy of life is a great reminder for whenever times get tough for us. And I'm sure you're going to be as captivated by Annette's story as I was. Enjoy. A very big welcome to you, Annette. I'm really excited for our conversation today. There are so many things that we could possibly cover, and I know we're just going to touch on a couple of them, which I'm disappointed about, but also it's going to give people a taste of what an incredible life you have led.
Thank you, Jo. It's great to be here. Yeah, I was thinking maybe we could do a Netflix series.
I think it'd be worthy of a couple of seasons, actually.
Let's do it.
Now, I like to say that by the time we get to the middle of our life, our 40s and our 50s, we've had a smorgasbord of experiences, and we've gone through, most of us, quite a bit of shit in our lives. So you've experienced, unfortunately, more than your fair share, and particularly during your younger years. And you've shared openly in public that your mother was leading a gypsy lifestyle, which meant by the time you were 17, you'd lived in 96 houses, which blows my mind. And in that time, you'd experienced abandonment, bullying, sexual abuse, and domestic violence. And in fact, you documented your first 25 years in a book called How to Eat a Shit Sandwich and Keep Smiling, which is a cracker title if ever I've heard one. So I want to start thinking about some of the things that you have talked about in your earlier years, and then we'll move through a conversation and talk about today what Annette's life is all like. So Annette, what's been the go-to for you when it comes to dealing with those more shitty times in life?
Well, I think that's why I called my book, it ends with "and keep smiling." I've always gone back to humour and finding something to laugh about, because I'm a big believer in, it's a little bit like Stuart Little, the movie, where he talks about there's always a silver lining in a dark cloud. And I don't know where that came from, and I don't know how I built that resilience. But throughout my life, when there's been something challenging, is that I always try and find something to make a joke about it, often very irreverently and probably inappropriately. But, like when you're faced with difficult times, if you can't lift yourself up with that energy of laughing and humour, you're just constantly in the doldrums. And I looked at my mum and I saw how challenging her life was and how miserable she was. There was no joy in her life. And I just think little Annette just went, you know what, I'm going to do things differently. I'm going to find things to laugh about. So I've always been the class clown. I've always been quick with a one-liner or a witty quip or, a joke or, okay, this has happened, but what about all of these other good things that have happened? So I think that's really helped, especially when times are tough. And I'll say to myself, Annette, it's okay for you to rent this space for a little while. You be miserable, feel sad, be angry, whatever it is. But don't take the mortgage out on it. You don't want to move in. You want to have that moment and then move on.
That's an incredible insight for being someone so young, because usually that's modelled to them. And obviously it wasn't modelled to you by your mum. And because you were moving so often, it'd be really hard to have a significant adult to show that to you as well. So thank goodness that was a part of your personality from a very young age, that you were able to do that.
And I wonder if that comes because I've always been a bookworm. I've been a voracious reader since I could hold a book. And I wonder, and I was very eclectic in my taste. I started like most kids in the 70s with Eden Blight and the Famous Five and the Secret Seven and Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys. And out of all of those stories, the kids were always facing some challenge and they always worked together or found solutions themselves. So I wonder if it was like osmosis or, it does get it. You remember the old Colgate ad where she put the chalk in?
Yes.
I wonder if it just seeped into me and became part of my world, because I was always walking around with my nose in a book. Like I've got a Kindle at the moment and its nickname is my best friend because books have always been the thing that I can rely to and go back on. So it was being modelled for me. It just wasn't being modelled for me by, the significant adults in my life who I would look at and go, oh, you're a mess.
Yeah. No, that's a really interesting insight that perhaps that you, did get those character traits from the strong characters that were written about in those stories. And I tell you what, I love when you were rattling off all of those lists. They were mine too. I was a voracious reader when I was a kid as well. Now, I've been a teacher, so I know how hard it can be for transient children when they come into yet, another new school. And you've written that when you were a child, those books, and you spoke about it before, the library became your best friends. So do you think that was a way for you to escape the reality of what your life was actually like when you were a young child?
Oh, absolutely. And it still is. I don't go to the library anymore because I've got a Kindle. I carry my library around with me. But the first and last thing I do every day is read, because it takes me away. It allows my brain to go to another place. It allows my imagination to soar, and it allows me to immerse in other people's lives, even if they're dealing with, hard stuff. You can either go, well, I'm glad my life's not that bad, or, hey, what an exciting adventure that they've been on. So when I was a kid, that library was just the safest place. And because I love books, the librarians loved me. So they would always, be handing me books and go, I think that you'd like this one, Annette, or you should read this one. So it just continued to foster that love of words and love of storytelling, which I think was no surprise that I went into a profession where it's all about writing and storytelling.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you, because reading and writing often go hand in hand. And I've found that children who, from a young age, love to read are often very good writers as well, simply because they're immersed in language all the time. So is that did you find your love of writing started at a young age as well?
Oh, yeah. I can remember writing poetry for my mum from the time I was 5. When she died and I was going through her things, I found these poems that I'd written to her through my childhood. I went through this pirate stage where everything that I did was tea stained and burnt on the edges. So these big scrolls of these poems telling Mum how awesome she was and how much I loved her. And I think back now, like, maybe I just understood the universe, and that sometimes we just need someone to tell us that we're good. So yeah, I definitely think reading, because I just kept thinking, oh, I could do this. And when you read, not only does it expand your vocabulary, as you know, as a teacher, but it expands your imagination, because you just see what's possible. Because when you live your life, you're only influenced by what's happening around you. And when you have the gift of a love of reading, which I think is a gift, and it makes me sad that people go, oh, I'm too busy to read. And it's like, don't be too busy, find the time, because it changes your world. That those words just started to seep out through my fingers, and I'd find as many different ways to use them as possible. And this, I always joke about this, but when I was probably between 10 and 12, at school holidays, I'd make my grandmother drive me to the library, which was like half an hour away because we didn't have one in our suburb. So I could go to the library and research a topic that I just pick at the start of holidays. It could be pineapples, it could be Africa. And I'd research it, and then I'd write a report, and I'd give it to Nan to read at the end of the holidays. And I probably needed more friends.
And that's it. Was that hard to make? Obviously, it would have been if you were moving so much, but that's been a sort of a theme of the social interaction and trying to establish relationships with your other, with other children must have been really difficult.
Yeah, because a lot of the time we were coming in the middle of the year, of a school year, and everyone's got their established friendships, and you're the new kid. And when I was a kid, I was very tall for my age, very blonde, like really golden blonde. I stood out, and I was also I'm still very broad, really broad. So I'd get picked on a lot and called names. And when you're teased and bullied at school, your natural reaction is to curl back up in your shell and keep to yourself. So no one was ever really able to get to know me, because I was just fearful all the time of being picked on and bullied. And that's where my sense of humour came from, because I quickly learnt that if you were the class clown, people loved you. Yeah. So from about, 10 on, that was my fallback. So when I moved to the Gap and went to the Gap Primary School, which was the last primary school I had to go to, that's what I did. Within the first week, I'd established myself as a joker and made friends a lot more quickly. I look back now and think, I wish I'd picked that up a little bit earlier.
Yeah, that truly makes sense, because you see that quite often happen again with children's personalities. Did you put up a wall too? Because maybe if you had the opportunity, this is just me thinking as an adult and going into a child's brain. Did you ever at any point go, right, well, I know I'm not going to be staying for very long, so I don't want to have to make a close relationship because it's going to go again, and you'll feel that disappointment and sadness? Did that ever happen?
I don't recall having those thoughts. I've always been a Pollyanna, looking for the bright side. I'd go, all right, here's my opportunity to make some friends. So I'd work really hard. But I guess there was a barrier, because I didn't feel I could invite people back to our house because we were really poor. Mum always kept a beautiful home, but, we didn't have all the nice things that, I'd hear my friends talking about, or the other kids. And there was always some boyfriend of mum around who quite often was an asshole. I think instinctively I went, well, I still need to keep people at arm's length, because I don't want them to come over for sleepovers, because how embarrassing would it be if mum started yelling and screaming at us, or a current partner. So, didn't go to a lot of parties. And I was invited to a party when I was 6. We were living in Launceston. And because mum just had this massive fight with her then husband, she said, well, I'm not taking you to the birthday party. And I can just remember feeling so crushed, because it was the only birthday party I'd been invited to the whole time I'd been at the school. And it was like, okay, well, I guess let's go read a book.
Oh, there's another shit sandwich for you.
There's another shit sandwich. Yep.
Oh,
it's sad.
It is sad. I'm feeling very sad for little Annette. Oh. Now, despite your disruptive schooling, and you were able to continue your education and go on to study journalism, which is just phenomenal. So tell us about your early years as a journalist, and was it a difficult road to start in, or was it a fairly logical, smooth transition?
No, it's a very competitive space, and definitely in the late 80s and 90s. So I got a job as an editorial librarian for the Fairfax Bureau.
Mm.
So that was the Sydney Morning Herald, the Australian Financial Review, and the Age. So it was me and 4 journalists. And it was just the best introduction to journalism because they were very supportive of me going to university. So they gave me space and time to do that. But they also poured into me, teaching me about asking questions and research and how to find out information, how to make contacts, how to put together a story. And one of the most exciting times was like during the late 80s when, Christopher Skase and Alan Bond were all in the news for, not doing the right thing by their shareholders and their businesses. And Fitzgerald inquiry was also on, the investigation into corruption in the Queensland government. So I was just so excited because they'd take me along to court. And I can remember one day I was downstairs getting a can of Coke when I was a Coke addict. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's Christopher Skase coming into our building because there was a law firm above us. And I raced back upstairs and I've said to Michael, who was the finance journalist for the Fin Review, Christopher Skase is downstairs. Christopher Skase is downstairs. And we've both run downstairs and stood at the door with our cans of Coke and our cigarette. I'm waiting for him to come so we could pounce on him. He must have gone out a different door because we stood there for 2 hours and nothing ever happened. But, it was that excitement that really filled my cup. And I went, this is what I want to do. So, but my entry into journalism, I worked for News Limited for 4 years. And it wasn't in the brochure. It was the News Limited head office has got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people over 4 floors, and one floor's the Australian and the other floor's the Telegraph Mirror, and then there's these artists and graphic designers and it was a real eye opener because I'm pretty forthright and upfront, and I had to learn how to play the game, of which I was absolutely atrocious at because if you treat me badly, I'm going to call you out on it. So it really stymied my career. I saw a lot of people move up and past me who came on after me because I was a troublemaker. I was the person when, really well-known, famous columnist went, girl, go get me this, which is how a lot of the senior journalists spoke to the younger staff. And I remember looking at him and going, you know what? My mother taught me please and thank you. Did yours?
Whoa.
Yeah, I got in a bit of trouble for that. But I remember sitting there going, but what gives him the right to speak to me like that? And why can't I call him out on his bad behaviour? Well, don't you know who he is? And it's I don't care who he is. So there was a lot of that. So after constantly being knocked back, I remember sitting in the editor of the Australian's office and I said to him, I don't understand why you're not grabbing me. I'm a great writer. I can talk to anybody. People share things with me. And I remember him looking at me going, well, Annette, you're a little bit too gregarious for the Australian.
Oh.
And I remember going, you're fucking kidding me. And he goes, see that? And I went, so you want a bunch of puppets? Is that what you're looking for? And he's going, well, we just need to be confident that if you're interviewing the Prime Minister or you're interviewing this person, that you're not going to offend them. And I went, isn't a journalist playing a role on stage? I said, I've written heaps of stories for you. Has anyone ever complained about my performance? And he went, well, no. And I said, so the problem's yours. So that didn't win me any friends either.
I'm sure it wouldn't. Yep. So you'd have a lot of little highlights over your page, I'd say, in HR.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And then I burnt my bridges because I took News Limited to court for, unfair workplace practices. So
wow. And what year was that, in the 80s or was that early 90s?
That was 94, 95. I got to the end of it and I'd been shafted into this deep, dark corner over near the sports department and told to file financial annual reports. And we used to all have to do shifts in the radio room. So they had a car out on the road 24 hours a day with a photographer and a reporter who the people in the radio room would monitor for, robberies and assaults and murders and those type of things. And you go, radio room tonight car, there's a 1026 in progress in Hurstville, and they would race off and do the story. And I knew that the beginning and the end was when they put me in there for 6 months on Midnight Dawn,
Gotcha.
which was just
Midnight Dawn.
the worst shift, boring, nobody to talk to, and you slept during the day while everybody else was awake. So I lost the power of words for a while because I didn't have anyone to talk to.
Yes. And so what was the outcome of the suit that you put against the...
Oh, I lost. There was no way I was ever going to win against Rupert Murdoch. They did offer me a settlement. Not a lot. I think it was 5 or 10 grand, which was a lot of money for someone who'd been living on chips and gravy and 2-minute noodles for 4 years.
Yes.
But being the principled person that I am, I said no. And I remember my lawyer going, "Are you sure?" And I said, "This keeps happening. And I keep being told that this is the way it always is. And that's not fair because they're abusing and using people whose whole drive and desire is to, for me, it was a calling. This is what I was born to do." So no, I lost. I appealed the decision, and I was very gratified that one of the top QCs in Sydney offered his services pro bono.
Oh,
because
wow.
it was both my lawyers. This was before, pay when you win.
Yes.
I'd given them, I documented so much that they went, "You should win this. This is a really strong case." And then when we did, and I remember my QC looking at me and he said, "It's hard to go up against Goliath." And I went, "But we tried, didn't we?" So I'm proud that I stood up to an organisation that is backed by millions and millions of dollars and this history of a way of doing things that didn't necessarily serve people to the best. So I like to think I'm a trailblazer.
Oh, I think so. That's a huge thing to do, especially when you're going on your own. It's not as though was it just you taking this to court?
No, I lost lots of friends because I tried to rally support, but everyone is focused on their career and they just went,
be fearful of losing it.
Yeah, and I went, well, I've got nothing to lose because they already hate me. And I decided that I was going to leave. There's a really great picture just up there of the caricature of me when I left News Limited. Can you see that?
I'll just explain with a...
It's a very large face. You can see it.
Very happy face with a protruding middle finger.
Yes, and my very drunk eyes because I wallowed in drugs and alcohol because I was so miserable. That's how people saw me, and it was like, oh, no wonder I was so sad.
Yes. And so was that hard then to go to find something else to do with your journalism credentials?
I got a job in publishing because I thought I don't want to work in journalism anymore. I don't want a bar of it. So I got a job working for a very large book publisher, and I think I lasted 3 months. I did something really inappropriate. Someone was on the phone from News Limited talking to the PR person, and I was listening, and I thought she hung up the phone, and I went, "She's a so-and-so." And she was still on the phone. Yes. So I got called into the office that afternoon and told that my services were no longer required. But I look back and I think I was so damaged and hurt and broken and devastated that I think I was grieving. I probably had post-traumatic stress because of trying to fit in with all these lessons. You've got to learn games, you've got to learn to play. So I spiraled into depression. So I locked myself away for 6 months. I think I was like a size 8 by the time someone said to me, "We're a little worried about you, Annette," because I drank, smoked lots of drugs. If anyone invited me out, as soon as I left the door, I'd start vomiting. And a very good friend of mine, which ironically was my drug dealer, said to me, "Annette, I'm really worried about you." He says, "You look terrible."
A drug dealer with a conscience. Well, there you go.
He was 54. I was 25. He was really like a big brother to me in a very bent type of way, because if I was in trouble, he'd give me money. If I was hungry, he'd take me out to eat. You know, he once took me on a holiday to Adelaide with my friend, and totally platonic, nothing sleazy or gross about it. I think he was just another lost, lonely soul who saw something in me. So he said to me this day, you know, I'm really worried about you. He said, I work with a psychologist. He said, I'd like to make you an appointment because I think you
Wow.
need to go and talk to somebody. And I was like, no, I don't. And he said, well, I'm going to be here tomorrow and I'm going to pick you up. I'm going to take you. And he said, I'll drag you if I have to. And I was like, all right. And it was the best thing that anyone could have done to me because everybody else was tiptoeing around. My
Yes.
flatmates barely spoke to me. So I was really alone. So here's this man who was supplying me with marijuana who went, I don't like seeing you like this. This isn't you. And it changed my trajectory. You know, I got well. He had a spare room in his house. And I just said to him, you know what? I think I'm going to go home. I'm going to go back to Brisbane. This has not worked out. I need to go be with my mum and my sister and people who love me for who I am. So within a week, I packed everything up, which wasn't much. And he hired me a car, paid for my petrol, gave me $200, sent me on my way.
Wow.
So, yeah, so I took 2 days to drive home and,
He was
you
your
know, maybe,
guardian angel during that time then, wasn't
yeah,
he?
yeah, his name was Captain Bligh. That was not his real name, but that's what we called him,
Yeah.
Captain Bligh. He was, and I think looking back
There's
now,
your pirate theme.
yeah, yeah, I didn't think about that. You know, he drove a cab, air quotes there, and it was called the Bounty. And looking back now, he was autistic, had all of these really odd idiosyncrasies. You know, he was really fixated on numbers. His cab number was 3344. So whenever the odometer turned over to 3344 or whatever sequence, we would, yay, celebrate. We'd go somewhere and have something nice to eat.
Oh, is that classic?
Yeah.
And what happened then when you moved to Brisbane?
I moved back to Brisbane and I just went and actually organised an interview with the editor from The Australian who told me I was too gregarious. He had then moved back because he was a Queensland boy. He moved back to the Courier Mail and I rang him and I said, look, this is what I really want to do with my life. And I said, and I really want to stay in Brisbane, work for my local paper. Can I come in and see you? So I went in to see him and got, you know, all corporated up, dressed up and did my hair and my makeup, looked totally different to what I had at News Limited. And he went, well, I'm going to set you a couple of assignments. And he said, and if you do those well, he said, you've got the job. And I went, but I've got this portfolio of work I've done. You know, I can do it. And I said, you're just putting up a barrier. And I said, thanks, but no thanks. This is not the space I want to work. So I walked out, me and my principals. It's like, why can't you just suck these things up and do them? So I went and worked for a media monitoring company. So I thought, well, I can use my journalistic skills to analyse and monitor the media. So I lasted there for about a year. They brought in a new manager and she was a very strong female who didn't like other strong females. So she sabotaged everything possible till I went to the point, I'm out of here.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was like, okay, I guess I'm not going to be a journalist. I'm not going to have anything to do with media anymore. So I got a job as a support worker with people with disabilities in a workshop where they got all these different contracts. So I did that for, almost 4 years until I fell pregnant with my first son. It was just, I went and got my postgrad in special education. I became a workplace assessor. I learnt sign language because a quarter of our workforce were either hearing impaired or deaf. I learned how to drive a forklift and I worked with these 60 amazing human beings who had been a far bigger shit sandwich than I would ever have to deal with. And they'd show up every day excited about just doing something and feeling valued. And it was a real confidence booster, but also a real injection of this is what life's about. This is, you know, where can you go and do good and be good and help others do the same. So I'm still in contact with a few of them today. They still message me and this is like 22 years later. You know, I made some really great connections and friendships there. And it's like, oh, this is what the world's meant to be like.
Oh, that's lovely. And so how did that, when you left that position, and you can explain to everyone what you do now, how did it move into or morph into this area?
Well, I had my first baby, Zaid, so he's 22 in just over a week. And then I had my second baby. So he was a surprise because I'd always been told I'd never have children. So Zaid he just walked past and gave me live long and prosper sign. So Zaid was just this most treasured little human because I thought this is the only one I'm ever going to have. So I'm staying home with him. I'm going to just pour into him.
Mm.
I had to go back to work because my husband was working a job and you can't live on one income.
Yeah.
So, this is early 2000s. So I just did lots of bits of jobs. I was a sex call worker for a week. That was interesting. And then I scored this job with this online call centre. So I could sit there and breastfeed and, hi, this is Annette from Virgin Credit Cards. Would you like to start your application? So that was awesome. I delivered newspapers, I did the census, whatever would keep me at home so I could be with Zaid. And then one day I woke up and went, I don't feel very well. I felt like this before, and I remember waving the covered pregnancy test under my husband's nose and going, we're pregnant again. Oh, my God, I can't believe we're pregnant. So I stayed home for 10 years until Quinn started primary school. Probably when he was around 2, I got itchy feet, and it was like, I really need to get back into journalism. I can't ignore this anymore. So I scored some journalism work I could do from home. I wrote about forklifts and ship to shore cranes and all types of material handling equipment for 12 months. And then I scored what would be one of the best journalism jobs I've ever had with the senior newspaper as their Queensland stringer. And I wrote about politics and finance, and I met some of the most incredible human beings that I've had the pleasure of meeting. People, in their 60s, 70s and 80s who had lived these magnificent lives. And I met a man who made handmade violins for, violinists at Juilliard. And I met a man who had been a concentration camp prisoner in Dachau, and he'd written a book about it. And I met a lady who had volunteered with Meals on Wheels for 40 years. And, I'd rock with my babies to these interviews and be fed biscuits and tea. And I'd sit there and just be able to write these beautiful stories about these people that nobody would ever have known.
Yes.
They go, oh, love, like I just do what I do. And I go, but what you do has meaning and significance. And there's people who'll be inspired by what you do. Please share your story. Oh, well, if you think it's worth it. So off I toddle. So by the time the kids got into school, I went, you know what, time for me to get back to work. I was a little nervous because I'd been out of the workplace for 10 years and I thought, who's going to hire me? I'm like in my 40s and I've got my last corporate experience, I was 25. So a job ad came up for a fairly large not-for-profit looking for a media relations officer. So I applied, I got an interview, I did the interview, I walked out and went, I reckon I nailed that. And I got a phone call the next day saying, we really love you. We're not quite sure that you're right for the media relations, but we've made a new role for you. We'd love you to be our publications editor. And I was like, I don't know anything about publishing a magazine. I said that to her. I said, I've written for them. I don't know how to publish one. And she said, you'll pick it up. Okay, then. So I did that for 3 years, then just moved around a bit, went as comms manager. And so my current iteration of what I do started in 2013. After a year, I'd been headhunted for this very large not-for-profit organisation as comms manager. It was it's this greenfields role for you, Annette. Come in, we think you're amazing. You can do whatever you want and help us grow and get our story out there. And yep, I don't work for religious not-for-profits with lots of middle-aged men. That's all I can say. Oh my
Even
God.
I know that in a brief moment, short time that we've been.
Look, that's the Pollyanna Joe coming out again. It was like, I'd sit in board meetings and just think, you guys just like listening to yourselves. like we don't get anything done, and with the religious aspect to it, it was especially the particular religion that they were. Oh, I can remember we were doing a groundbreaking for a new aged care facility, and I wanted to bring in one of the Indigenous elders on which the land they were breaking to do a welcome to country. Oh, well, did that get shot down in flames? It was like, and I remember looking at them going, you guys, you realise we live in this world, not. So after 12 months and a formal complaint against my senior manager, the whole of the marketing department was made redundant for financial reasons. There's those air quotes again.
Yes.
So off I go, spiral into depression again, because it's like, see, I'm a loser. Nobody wants me. And at the time, the Queensland government had just shed something like, 12,000 public service jobs. So there was a lot of competition for comms roles. So I got this job with a vet company who was selling software to other vets. So I did that for 6 months. It was really soulless and boring. And so I binge watched Dexter in that time, and because I could really relate to Dexter in that moment, because it was like, I think I might become a serial killer.
What bodies would you have left littered around?
Yeah, that's right. Well, I really appreciated his spirit, because he was only killing bad people, and I went, well, I could do that. And
with your social conscience, you definitely could. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And a friend of mine invited me to a seminar on how to use webinars to build a business. And I was like, I don't have a business. And she went, just come along, get out of the house. So they asked for volunteers of people who were experts at what they did. And I was sitting there, arms crossed, legs crossed, eyes crossed, going, when's the sell? When's the sell? And my girlfriend's elbowed me, tiny little Japanese lady. And like, gee, she left a bruise on my ribs. And she went, you're an expert, you're a journalist, you know how to get stories into the media, you should get up there. And so I reluctantly put my hand up and went, I've been a journalist for most of my life, and I can do this. And they've gone, oh my God, that's amazing. So I pitched, my idea was how to get free publicity for small business. And I remember the guy sitting at the back of the room who was this presenter's partner, business partner, and his head went bolt upright, and he pointed his arm and he went, oh my God, I love it. So the crowd had to vote on who was going to be the guinea pig. I felt like I was at the Oscars, because I got the biggest claps and the biggest cheers. And then it was like, oh, now I've got to come up with something. So I came up with a 5-module course called PR Mastery. And the rest, as they say, is history. My business was born. I became the PR superwoman, working with small businesses, teaching them how to do PR, realising as a teacher, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. People would pay me to teach them and then do nothing with it. And I went, this doesn't sit well with me. It's nice getting money for nothing, but I don't feel that it's very congruent with my values. So I flipped and I became the publicity genie. And then I did the work for people. So I'd create them strategies and get them in the media and podcasts and write awards for them. And 3 years ago, I officially started the Audacious Agency with my partner in Shine, Lauren Clement. And 3 years on, we got through COVID, which was, oh my God, it's hard. Imagine starting a new business in February 2020. In March 2020, all of our new clients were gone. We had no income, we had no business. So we just got into solution mode and stepped up and, created some great free resources to help people stay visible. We ran webinars, we did free strategy sessions, we did a really low cost 6-month program on how to help. It was like $99 a month, and people would come and we do a webinar on branding, on storytelling, on awards, and help people find a path forward. And so by August 2020, all of that hard work paid off, and we had a $50,000 month. And it was like, what? Where did that come from? And it really reinforced to me the value of the law of reciprocity and the law of giving freely without expectation of return.
Yes.
I hope that I always show up that way. I charge for my services, and we charge well for the work that we do, but we also give a lot. And we also are constantly sharing with people really actionable things that they can do in their business.
No, I'm definitely a big believer in that as well. It's something that it's a strong principle of mine that I've always lived by. So you've now got this incredible business. What else is on the bucket list for you? Because you've got whatever has happened has got you to this point now. So all of those, good, bad, and indifferent experiences that you've had in the workforce and in life have got you set up now as far as your career goes. What else are you looking at?
Well, I think if there's a zombie apocalypse, I will survive because I'm resilient and tenacious.
Yeah.
And, if there is one, come to my house, I'll look after you. But no, seriously, our goal is to sell the business within the next 3 or 4 years. We're working really hard at developing systems and processes and knowledge of PR and awards out of my head, and teaching the team and empowering other people to be able to, so I don't have to do everything.
Yeah.
So we're big on teaching our team and getting that stuff out. So selling the business would be fantastic. I've got a figure in my universe. If you can deliver that would be really nice, because I'd like to take that money. I will retire. I'll buy myself a nice little unit on the Gold Coast for my husband and I, 1 bedroom, kids, no room for kids. And then I'm going to write books.
Brilliant.
I would also like to ghostwrite. I think I said to Earl the other day, when I was telling him what my big plans for our future is, and I said, I want to be able to, put that money that we get, invest it, and twice a year I work with, 2 people writing their story, whether it's a memoir, whether it's a fictional or whatever that is, because I can use all my journalistic skills to make it sound like them. And that will be our spending money for our retirement. And I'll do that until I can't type anymore, or, maybe there might be technology that attaches to my head that will go directly onto the screen.
Yeah.
I actually came up with a really good fictional book story idea today. So I think next year I'm going to write a sequel to How to Eat a Shit Sandwich, and I'm going to call it Ain't That the Shit? Something like that. It will have shit in the title. You can count on that. So I'm going to write a sequel about the next 25 years of my life, because people keep going, we want to know what's happened. And I was like, okay, really? Okay. I was going to write a book about a journalist, but I've created these amazing friendships over the last 3 years online. And whenever we get together in person, you can see those barriers breaking down, but there's stories about you that you don't tell, or so when we get together, we've had these amazing deep conversations, and we've shared things that we've done in the past, that make us interesting people. So I think I'm going to write a book about 5 women who meet online, who get together 4 times a year for a drink and for a meal, and share a story about some adventure that they've had in their life. So it'll be totally made up. It'll come out of my imagination. I want it to be sexy and raunchy and funny and irreverent, but above all, it's going to be funny.
Oh, I'm looking forward to that read, because that sounds like it'd be a great yarn. I can imagine it. So you've obviously had so many different experiences job-wise, and I love hearing and seeing women from all different careers and walks of life, particularly when they want to start changing direction in midlife, and you've had a big change of direction, and that allows other people to see what's possible for them. What is your advice that you would give to any woman who might be thinking about changing her story in the second half of life?
The first thing that comes to mind is feel the fear, but do it anyway, because any change is disruptive, confronting, challenging, and that's what stops us from changing, because that fear of unknown. But you got to be in it to win it. If you are unhappy with where you're at, obviously something needs to change.
Yes.
And if you don't do it, then no one else will. And I don't think anybody wants to get to the end of their life and regret that they didn't take that path, because the beautiful thing about change is that you may take that path and it may not work out. I've done it so many times in my life and gone, oh, well, that sucks. That didn't work out the way that I thought it would. I'm just going to make another decision and change again. And I think if you can get comfortable with that ebb and flow of change, then you feel invincible because there's nothing or no one that can stop you except yourself. And I think another really wise thing one of my friends said to me is, people are going to love you or hate you, and it has nothing to do with you. So if you're worrying about making change because of the way that it might impact others, I think that there's nothing wrong with being selfish about our decision making, because that's, if you're going to sell your house up and kick your husband out and, the kids are, okay, there's consequences to that. And there's always conversations we have to have about change. But I think particularly as women, especially women who've raised children or caring for elderly parents, or as women, we sacrifice a lot through our lifetimes, is if there's not a moment when you can look and you can go, when does my life become about me when you reach your middle age? I don't know when it'll be, because I'm 52. Maybe I've got 30, 40 years left on this planet. I'm not going to live it going, oh, damn, I wish I'd done that. I'm just going to go and do it. And it was funny, my husband was telling Quinn the other day, who's on the spectrum, so he looks at the world very black and white, about, making decisions. And he said, just look at your mum. She just decides she's doing something and goes for it, and damn everybody else. And I was like, well, that's not quite it. But, but now I go, if I want to do something and it doesn't hurt anybody else, and it's not going to have a ripple effect of disrupting other people's lives, I'm going to do it. I'm there. So I say, just do it.
Yeah. No, that's great advice. And those no's are a stepping stone to somewhere else as well. And even the yeses can be, because then you can explore how much further you can go with it. And then the fear can sometimes set in. Christ, it can go a long way. So how far are you willing to go?
And no's not a bad word. We've wrapped it up.
No,
as,
no, as I say, no.
Yeah, no.
I agree with that.
Yeah, we've wrapped up no and mistakes and failure and as bad things. While they might be bad in the moment, here's the Pollyanna coming out, is that there's so much value to learn through why did that person say no to me? Was it something that I did, or is it something going on for them? I made this mistake, or that didn't work. What can I learn about it? How can I do things differently? And I think that's the ultimate joy of being a human being, that we can't just live in this up place of joy and happiness. Well, we can always live with joy, but it's not always going to be sunshine and rainbows. And even with the brimstone and fire, when you put them together, you've got balance.
Yeah. And that's something that I know now as my children, as being young adults, are going through, that those no's can be very painful, but they can also launch you to somewhere else. And it teaches you resilience, and it gives you some more life skills that can get you on the path to where you want to be. And if that's not the right path, well, then you've learnt from that as well. So as an adult, you can start to see that, but it can be quite frightening, particularly when you are in the middle of life and you go, well, I haven't got that much longer left, but in reality is my working life. What could I do? And what if it fails? But then what if it doesn't? It's always, very encouraging.
We have to go back to, but what if it does?
Yes.
More often than not, things work out. If you look at the scheme of things, the things that go wrong, unless you're incredibly unlucky, most things work out or adapt and change so that
that's
you can
right.
make
May not be exactly
it.
what you envisage, but it will end up working out.
But we live in this world where we're filled with negative Nellies and, the peanut gallery thinks that they know everything, and tall poppy syndrome and imposter syndrome. And we let that get in the way of changing our life. And it's just so damaging that we let all of this external stuff impact what's going on inside our head. So, I just say go for it, because who knows? What if it's the best thing you've ever done?
Yes. No, great advice. So can we just change direction then and talk? We've talked about you as a professional woman. What about you as a woman? You're married, you've got 2 young children. How did you meet your husband? And how old were you?
I was 25 when I met Earl, and I'd actually sworn off men because I read my book, and I had this series of just disastrous relationships. So I was like, that's it. If I want to have kids, I'm just going to go get artificial insemination. I don't need a man. And my best friend, Angela, who I've been friends with since I was 10, she was one of my first friends when I started at the last primary school. She went, oh, my God, this guy, he's like the male version of you. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. You're just trying to set me up with someone. She's going, no, he really is. So when I moved back to Queensland, she said, oh, you've got to come and meet this guy. And I've gone, yeah, all right then. So we toddle off. He was playing in a band at the time. And it was like, he's pretty cute. I like him. He's nice. He's funny. He's really, really smart. What's not to like? So this October 1995, and we've been together ever since.
Wow, that's very
So
special.
we celebrate our 24th wedding anniversary on the 27th of December. We have our moments, of course. There's been moments where it's like, I'm going to drown you in the bath. And I'm sure he's wanted to drown me in the bath as well. But, we still travel together. We go to concerts together. We sit on the couch and we hold hands. And so, yeah, he's my best friend.
Oh, that's lovely. Sounds very familiar to me, because that's the sort of relationship, thankfully, that I've got with my husband too.
Oh, nice.
It's very special, so it needs to be celebrated, because not everyone is as fortunate as that. So when you're onto a good thing, stick with it and
I'm
celebrate it and nurture it.
Years next year, so I'm thinking we might need to do something really special for that.
Do
not renew our vows early.
No, you don't have
to. I don't want to do that. But I'm thinking, like a big party or, something special where we can invite our friends and family and go, we made it. We made it.
Yeah, no, that's lovely. And Annette, you've struggled a lot with chronic illness over the years, and you've also got an incredible weight loss story, is just another one of the layers and chapters that you've got. What was a catalyst for you to decide that you wanted to do something about losing your weight?
Oh, gosh, looking at myself in the mirror when I was overweight, I would avoid looking in the mirror. And I think one day I just kind of caught myself, and it was like, oh, my God, who's that heifer lump in the mirror? And someone had sent me a photo from an event that I'd spoken at, and I was looking at her next to me, and I've like gone, oh, my God, when did I become so big? And I knew I was big, but I didn't realise I was that big. And my health was, I have Hashimoto's, and I've, endometriosis and asthma and eczema and chronic ear disease. But the Hashimoto's, especially as I was going through menopause, really impacted my weight. So I put on a lot of weight very quickly. So I took myself off to the doctor last January because I'd been to see endocrinologists, and they went, all middle-aged men, well, there's nothing that we can do about it. You just have to eat better and exercise more. I've gone, I'm doing that, you gidgets. Didn't say that to them at the time, and it was, but I'm fairly certain my face said it, because apparently my face says what I'm thinking. So I was like, well, that was $400 wasted. So I found a GP in my local area who specialised in women's health, particularly thyroid conditions. So I went and saw an amazing woman. She was around my age, and I sat there and I cried, and I said, I hate who I am. I can't walk very far. My body hurts. I'm tired. Just everything about me is just dull and lifeless. And she looked at me and she said, have you considered weight loss surgery, Annette? And I've offended. I'm only 140 kilos, and I was offended. And I was like, isn't that for people who eat 700 hamburgers? Because I thought weight loss surgery was just for people who had eating problems.
Yes.
And she was great. She got her glasses and she pushed them down her nose, and she looked at me and she said, Annette, I suggest you go educate yourself. You're a smart woman. And I went, all right, I've been told. So off I toddled, and I joined some groups, and I rang surgeons, and I read everything I could find, and I looked, because she had said to me that they're getting some great results for people with thyroid conditions. It's managing to reset their thyroid. So I found some research, some early research into it, and read it. And so booked myself in June. I was in surgery end of July. So that was last year, and I've lost 72 kilos, and it's the most life-changing, best decision I think I've ever made. It wasn't easy. Like, a lot of people go, well, that's cheating. And it was like, well, you bloody well have 3/4 of your stomach cut out, and you see how easy that is, because I had to learn to eat, and my taste buds changed. And The way that I drank changed. Like I could no longer scull anything. Like I used to be a big sculler of water. Now I'm dainty little sips, dainty little bites. And people will go, don't you miss food? And it's like, you know that I still eat. Like I still have to eat. Like it's not this magic thing that means I never eat again. But yeah, it's just been liberating to be able to shed that extra weight because my joints thank me. Because in my head, I've got maybe 30 or 40 years left on this planet. Do I just suck it up and put up with it because everyone tells me that I have to? Or do I do something drastic and extreme? So, yeah, I took the drastic extreme measure and, my thyroid, my last blood test for the first time in 22 years was in the black.
Wow. Congratulations.
My thyroid is operating within its normal parameters.
That's incredible. So you've lost that extraordinary amount of weight. What have you gained? Like a new lease of life?
Well, I guess definitely a new lease on life. You know, I can move. I can, like, sometimes I forget things just so I can run up and down the stairs. I can walk longer than 100 meters without what Lauren says, rubbing my back on the wall like a cow, scratching it in, because my back had just ached so much because I was carrying all of that weight. A new appreciation of food and how much or how little we actually need to eat to be healthy. Like I survive on 5 very small meals a day, you know, maybe a kilo of food a day. And all my blood tests are coming back excellent. You know, I go to sleep, I wake up refreshed most times, except for the end of the year, I'm ready for a holiday. I can go and buy nice clothes.
Yeah.
I don't have to wear, you know, it's just funny when you're big, how you think that wearing a big caftan is going to cover up that you're fat. It doesn't. It's just a comfort for you that people can't see all your rolls. So I'm reveling in actually wearing jeans and tucking my T-shirt in, even though, you know, I'm certainly never going to be on McPherson. I've got lots of baggy, loose skin, but I can move and I can adjust. And I think it's made me happier.
Yeah. You've got an exciting second half of life to look forward to.
Oh, watch out, world.
Yeah, look out. We've got some good books to read, more yarns to find out about that.
Yeah,
exciting.
Like you thought that people think, oh my God, because when I say to them how much different my life is, and they went, but look at all the things you did when you felt like crap. And I went, yeah, imagine what I can do now that I feel good.
Yeah. No, that is exciting for you. So we'll wrap up with this final question. If you could look into the future, what do you hope 80-year-old Annette will say about current day Annette?
Well, that's a great question. I think 80-year-old Annette would say, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you for never giving up. I'm proud of you for always trying to find a way forward, because it means that in my 80s now, I'm able to look back on a rich and full life that was full of adventure, experiences and lessons, and it's made me the wise old woman that I am now, and everybody listen to me.
I think you will be able to hold court very easily, Annette. You're going to have some great yarns in the nursing home.
I always joke that one of my favourite shows is Wentworth, and I always joke that if I went to prison, I'd be Queen Bee within a week.
That I have no doubt. Yeah. Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed our chat, and I know, as I said at the start, we could go on for a long time because you've lived an extraordinary life. You've got an extraordinary life to come forward in the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and I look forward to seeing where that takes you. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jo. You're an awesome question asker. That's not a very good word, but that was excellent. Thank you. I don't often talk about me, and I feel really privileged that you found my story interesting and wanted to share it. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for listening and sharing your time with me today. I'd love you to hit subscribe on Apple Podcast or your favourite podcast app to keep spreading these empowering messages. Please share this podcast with other incredible midlife women in your world. Join me again next week for another redefining midlife conversation. Thanks again for tuning in.